Brothers of the Serpent Podcast, special edition, special sode. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons and monsters and serpents. This is Brothers of the Serpent Podcast, and we are coming to you not live from the 10 by 10 by 10 tangent cube of science, where we are nestled amongst the dusty bones of an ancient seabed high atop the Edwards Plateau. And like we said, this is a special episode of the Brothers of the Serpent Podcast. We are heading to the Cosmic Summit 2024 tomorrow. And Kyle and I have been working on our presentation. We've been putting in some work on that for the past couple of days. You know, like GMA says, if you wait till the last minute, it only takes 1 minute. So we've got it completed. We've gone through it a couple of times together. And but the only reason that we will be delivering this presentation at the summit is because of you guys, right? It's what we said last year.
We love you.
We love you. And because you guys have supported us in this podcast, that's why we are able to go to the summit and, and give the presentation. So, we made this because you guys made it possible. So we're going to give you our version of our presentation before we go. So if you don't want to buy the live stream or whatever, if you can't afford it, we totally understand.
Terrible marketing move.
Yeah. We're terrible at marketing. But we wanted to give you guys at least our version of the presentation. But if you want to see Ben's and Randall's and everybody else's, you're going to have to get those tickets. Yeah.
What's our code for buying live
Snakes 50.
Snakes 50.
That's right.
We're also playing a show. $50 Dynasty's rocking the Procession album live.
Yeah.
On Saturday night at 9:30.
So which one?
Lots of pressure.
Which one are you more stressed about?
I can't tell. I'm super nervous about both. I've never given a presentation before in my life. I've played thousands of shows.
Yeah.
But this, George asked me a long time ago if we would do it, and I was like, hell yeah. But then it was like he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to put it on. And so as time kept going by, we decided to say, hey, man, we're out because we can't just be not sure. Then he comes back like, what?
A week and a half, 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks, 2 weeks before the summit. And he's like, hey, man, okay, I can definitely do it. Can you guys do it? And then it's like, oh, man. Yeah.
Terrible mistake.
No, I couldn't say no. I wanted to do it really badly, and just hoping for the best. I mean, we had a great rehearsal the other night, and it was sounding awesome. But we're not bringing our own gear.
Yeah,
we're renting everything. It's like it's just too much to try to travel with all this stuff. I mean, we've got 12 guitars and 4 guitar amps, a bass rig, the drum set. It's just like, nah, that ain't.
Can't bring it. Yeah, can't fly with all that stuff.
And all the
nobody
pedal
has
boards
time to drive. So
my God, I was trying to get an insurance policy on all that stuff, and it was like, holy crap! Like when we started figuring out what it was, I was just like, whoa, that's a lot. So, anyways, we're renting the gear. We've pretty much got that nailed down, and we're bringing a few things like our custom pedal boards and stuff like that. We're bringing.
Are we going to get video from the show?
I hope so.
Because if we do,
man,
we will publish it on the Snake Bros YouTube, so you guys can see that as well.
Yeah, the Dynasty show, that'd be cool.
I mean, unless we totally bomb.
If we bomb,
and then we're never going to publish
you're never going to see it. We're not going to bomb George. I don't want to scare George. So it's going to be fun. We're Saturday night. We're doing the show around 9:30, and then Sunday at 11, Russ and I do the presentation. So
a.m. 11 a.m. I asked George. I was like, "Give me a afternoon slot on the first day,
so
we have a morning slot on the last day." Thanks, George. Appreciate it.
You seem super laid back about going up on stage and doing the presentation.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that today. I'm like, I think this one's way easier than Unfinished.
Really?
Yeah.
Unfinished was just like, Nothing but net. What you talking about?
It was 180 photographs with almost no text. I had to basically memorize it. Now, it helped that I had given it a bunch of times, right?
Yeah.
But then because of this, of the way the summit, I was used to giving it with laser pointers and stuff.
Yeah.
So what made me real nervous was I had to go through and rework the entire thing and draw arrows, and then everything had to be timed properly. And I was just like, oh my God.
Don't scare me. I don't want to hear it.
This is so much simpler. Plus, we're both going to be up there, so we can, prompt each other if it's not going to be a big deal. But yeah, this is like, I was thinking about it last time. I'm like, this is going to be a breeze.
I'm finished. Dude, I'm going to get up there and I'm going to be like,
don't worry.
There's T-pillars. Russ.
Well, let's start it. Let's
Okay.
see how it goes. That's one of the reasons we're doing this show, so we can get a practice session in.
All right. You want to see a presentation? Here we go.
Yeah. So many of you guys have seen our Göbekli Tepe video that we made for the channel. So this presentation is going to be a kind of a version of that, but with some extra thoughts and some continuation of basically the research that we did for that. So it's like, it's got more stuff in it, right?
Yeah, I think we also narrowed down the focus of what it was. The video had a lot of points to make, and this is more focused on one particular point.
Yeah, that's right. So it is Göbekli Tepe, a treasure of the ancients. And what we want to show is that just like modern archaeology, really, and all of us, all of you that listen to the show, all of us really, we treasure these sites and these places, these artifacts, and the knowledge that we can get from them. It really looks like the ancient people who were occupying this site also treated it like an ancient treasure.
Yeah.
So that's where we're going with this. So we'll start, first of all, with some of the articles that were coming out. I think when it was getting its UNESCO World Heritage, what would you call that?
I don't know what they call that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it
became a World Heritage site. Yeah. So there were lots of what I think of as
dedication. I don't know what they call it.
There were lots of interesting what I think of as question mark headlines. Is this the world's first architecture? Question mark from the Art newspaper. And also, there was a lot of, is it the world's first this? Is it the 0 point in time? And you see a lot of this at the visitor center when you go there. And then plenty of world's first temple? Question mark. Like this one from the Smithsonian. This one from World History Encyclopedia, world's first temple? Question mark. And Archaeology Archive from the Archaeological Institute of America, world's first temple? No question mark. This person is pretty sure it's the world's first temple.
It is definitely, yeah. They decided that's what
the
what the
world's
deal
first
was.
temple, period.
No more question.
Yeah, no more question. But it's interesting. It's interesting because the narrative is changing. So you can see these articles from 2008 and earlier, but it no longer is considered this because of the discovery of Karahan and other sites there that are older, at least centuries. Like Karahan, maybe 500-600 years older than Göbekli Tepe. So Göbekli Tepe is no longer the world's first temple. So this is a Google Earth view of the site. This is, if you look it up on Google Earth, this is the image you get. And as you can see, it is a normally dry and arid area. The only trees that are kind of in the area, I believe, are ones that have been planted. So you can see some trees in the upper right here, but those have been planted by people. And then there's orchards.
Well, those are also in the valleys.
Yeah, that's in the valley. That's right. Then there's orchards up there in the area around Göbekli Tepe, and it is on top of a hill. This is a top-down view before they put the cover on it. So you can see the actual archaeological excavations here. So there are 4 monumental enclosures that have been excavated. They are between 65 and 100 feet in diameter. They have flattened bedrock platforms, so the actual enclosures themselves that contain the megaliths are all the way down on the bedrock. And somebody flattened the bedrock out, did a lot of work and flattened it out and left these pedestals to install the T-pillars into. And these T-pillars are over 16 feet in height, the central ones. And they can weigh up to 50 tons. So not insubstantial weights there. 50 tons is a lot, is a heavy load.
Yeah, imagine trying to stand that up.
Yeah. And get it up to the top of the hill.
Yeah.
You know.
But for example, in ancient Egypt, they're like, oh, they stood up these really heavy stones by filling the thing with sand and then
letting it tilt.
Yeah, and then you dig the sand out with the obelisk. Like there's no sand here.
No.
So it would have been a trick.
No, you gave them lots of pizza and beer.
That's right.
And then they can stand it up.
Ritualized work feasts.
So the oldest dates that they have established for the site, the Göbekli Tepe enclosures, is around 9,500 BCE. So almost 12,000 years old. So how did they get those dates? They got those dates because of the midden material. The entire site is embedded in an enormous mound of material called midden. As you can see in this picture here, if you look all of these, the rocks and the dirt and the material that the enclosure is dug into is the midden itself. So what is midden? Basically, it is old trash. It's described here on Wikipedia as an old dump for domestic waste, which may consist of animal bone, human excrement, botanical material, mollusk shells, potsherds, and lithics, which would be stone tools and other artifacts. And this is an example of a shell midden in Argentina. I just thought this was it's actually tough to find good photos of midden.
It is,
because it's just piles of dirt and rock.
It's hard to take photos of midden.
It is. Yeah.
I've taken plenty of photos of midden, and when we were doing making the video, I was like looking through my midden photos, and I was like,
no,
it's hard to see.
Yeah, it just
in a
looks
photo,
like dirt.
But yeah, this shell midden here is very obvious, and we have actually had the chance to crawl around on and look through some shell midden down in Florida. It looks just like this. Mostly just the shells, but there are artifacts. You can find tools and things in there that got lost or buried in the pile as well.
And it's interesting, if you look at this picture, you can kind of see the stratification, layers and layers and layers of shell deposits. And this is probably thousands of years of shell deposits. So they were harvesting shells and cracking them open and, doing what they did with them, and then throwing the refuse, the shells, away in the same spot for a long, long time. And then it leaves these stratified piles. The other thing that Göbekli Tepe is embedded in, or the name for this mound it's in, is a tell. So a tell is slightly different, and the description here is an artificial topographical feature, a mound consisting of the accumulated and stratified debris of a succession of consecutive settlements at the same site, the refuse of generations of people who built and inhabited them, and it contains natural sediment as well. So
the main thing that sets it apart is that they have construction materials in the midden.
That's right. So basically, a tell is construction debris along with midden, like occupation trash. So this is an example of a tell Kashish in Israel. As you can see, they can look just like a hill, but it's artificial. This is not a natural formation. I love this picture. Tel Bari in Syria. You can see archaeological excavations there on the right side where they've exposed some of the buried structures, and then you can see the stratification on the side. So this is an artificial hill that is basically consists of thousands of years of occupation, and like a village built there, and then a town built on top of the village, and a city built on top of the town. And it just builds up a big mound. And then later it's abandoned, and the whole thing crumbles, and then dirt builds up in it, and it just looks like a natural hill, but it's not. It's actually an ancient city. So let's take a look again at the Google Earth image of Göbekli Tepe. First, let's make it clear that this is a hilltop. So I have circled the hill here because Kyle, for example, and some other people see this as a valley when they're looking down. It looks like a valley, but it is a hilltop.
It still looks like a valley. I know. I don't know why but all the valleys look like the tops of hills, and the hilltops look like valleys for some reason.
So we'll zoom in a little bit. Again, we're looking at the site of Göbekli Tepe, and you can kind of see the tell here. It's the brighter or darker brown area. But it's much clearer if you go into historical imagery in Google Earth and you can find one where it was green. Now you can really see the difference. That green area in the middle is the tell. It is the midden, and because the midden is it's like compost, right? So it's fertile. So grass and other things will grow there, including the orchards that people have planted all around it. And you can see the rest of the hilltop is barren rock. There's a little bit of soil cover and some grass in there, but mostly it's exposed bedrock.
Yeah, the soil's just filling the little cracks and crevices in the bedrock.
Yeah.
And then there's grasses growing out of, a half inch of, bark and junk that's dead grass.
Right. So when we traveled to Turkey, it was right after some historic rain. So this is a picture we took of the hilltop. We're looking across one of the orchards that's up there on the midden at the hilltop, and you can see it's barren rock, but it's very, very green because they had just had a lot of rain. So it was beautiful to be there at this particular time. All the flowers and the green, and they were telling us, yeah, normally everything's just brown here, but it was very beautiful. This is just to give you some perspective. This is a video of us traveling up the road to the site, so you can see the steepness of the hillsides. And it's interesting because this ancient site is built in a remote place far away from any water sources, up on top of this barren hill, where most Neolithic peoples would build down in the valleys near water.
Yeah, this is the Germush mountain range. It's 2,500 feet above the Haran Plain, and this is the highest prominence in that mountain range. And I mean, it's also pretty interesting. We didn't have a slide on this, but there is a basalt outcrop.
That's right.
Just below where we're driving here, that's about 1 kilometer from the site, and it's very clear that the people that inhabited the site for thousands of years were using that basalt as a source for tool making.
So this is the road that we were just driving up. So this is just a photograph from the perspective of the road, and you can see the cover for the site up there on the upper left, and you can kind of see the hill, the midden mound.
And keep in mind, the cover is for a very minute portion of that mound. The mound itself, the tell itself, is around 1,000 feet in diameter. That cover is just covering the 4 monumental enclosures.
Yeah. And the van up there gives you scale on this picture. So here we are closer to the site. And again, you can see the bedrock protruding from the very thin soil cover, except for this enormous mound where the actual the enclosures are. And again, this is closer. So yeah, like Kyle was saying, the midden mound is huge, 50 feet deep at its deepest places, and 20 acres in extent, or 1,000 feet across at its widest points. That is a lot of material. Probably.
Yeah, try covering 20 acres in an inch of soil.
Yeah. Yeah. You need generations
much
and generations.
Less 50 feet. But that, you could see in the previous picture, sorry to go back on this, but where the bedrock was, like Russ was saying, that would have basically been the top of the hill.
That's right.
That exposed bedrock right in the foreground of this photo
is like one of the highest points of the hill. Yeah, exactly.
So everything else above that has been brought by human hands.
Yeah. Purposefully buried.
Purposefully buried. Yes.
Okay. So let's go back to the description of a tell real quick. Consisting of the accumulated and stratified debris of a succession of consecutive settlements at the same site. So what this is basically telling us is that the deepest layers in midden or a tell are the oldest layers. And that makes sense. So in general, the first layers that are laid down that end up being a big tell are the oldest ones. That's the first occupation of the site. Now, in some cases, this can be different. Like it can be eroded away, or there can be collapses like has happened at Göbekli Tepe. But in general, the deepest layers are the oldest. So looking at this picture of one of the enclosures, what do you notice? That the monumental parts, the megaliths, and the flattened bedrock platforms that they're in are at the bottom, of this enormous tell, which implies that they're in the oldest layers. So how do we have the age? How did they arrive at the age of the site that they cite so many times? Well, they dated material in the Midden, and also they discovered these points, all these tools and all these artifacts.
Now, these lithics allowed them pretty much immediately to date the site archaeologically, is what they call it, just by reference of these flint tools, because there was a well-established record of these very same tool types in many other places in in Anatolia and the Fertile Crescent area.
Yeah.
They are well documented alongside reliable carbon dated materials, right? They find these over and over again. So not only do they have established dates, but they have the repetition of finding these same tool types with the same radiocarbon dates again and again. So as soon as the archaeologists saw these points at the bottom layers, they already knew roughly how old these layers were.
Yeah. It's a recognizable tool type for sure.
Now they are, again, in the Midden. So that was datable for the Midden material, not
That's right.
the megalithic architecture.
That's right. And it's also interesting because they're they're beautiful points.
They are, yeah, they're
But
rudimentary.
they're a little bit rudimentary, yeah.
Yeah, they're very simple, like 3 or 4 breaks,
Yeah. But if you compare them to the Clovis points,
which are about the same age.
Yeah,
The Clovis, being roughly 12,000 years old, probably somewhat older. A completely different part of the world. But these are beautiful. This is a very artistic style. They have ground bases, so there's multiple different types of work. They have percussion flaking. They have pressure flaking. You can see that they patterned their flaking very regularly along the points. So they're artistic. The materials that they're using also are very high quality.
that's right.
Flint materials. And then you compare them to these other points that are found that are the same age, roughly, that are found at the bottom layers of Göbekli Tepe. And you're just like, this is not anywhere close to the same quality or craftsmanship
Yeah.
of the Clovis people. And yet, these points found at Göbekli Tepe are beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I love them, and I wanted to take them home with me, but I didn't. I promise. I held them in my hand, and I put them back down and cried. But
This is a video of Kyle walking around Göbekli Tepe, just kind of looking at the Midden. And this is also evidence of why it's no fun to hunt arrowheads with Kyle, because he can spot them from.
there it is.
It's right there, guys. Right there. And I'll zoom in one more time, and then the rest of us can see it. There it is. Look at that. Yeah, we're walking around on the walkway, and he's like, right there.
Yeah, it's like I couldn't reach it. Couldn't get over there from the walkway. There was a huge crevasse between us. But yeah, this type of stuff was sitting out in the Midden material all over Göbekli Tepe with these little flakes and little flint flakes. So it was very obvious that, some people were here making rudimentary tools.
That's right. So other things they found in the Midden are other lithic tools, specifically grinding stones. Lots and lots of grinding tools. On the right here is an example of one in the little tiny museum they have in the visitor center there at Göbekli Tepe. And they actually found over 7,000 of these grinding tools in that Midden pile around the site. So, and they thought that was excessive. They're like, this is way too much, way more than you would expect to find for a settlement of this size, which is what led to, the talks of massive ritual work feasts to facilitate the construction of the site.
And again, we're going to be making this point multiple times, but all of this evidence of who was there comes from the Midden, not the megaliths themselves. The megaliths are their own artifacts, but they don't really tell us about who built them.
That's right.
It's this midden material which is telling us about a people who were there.
And that is the PPN, or pre-pottery Neolithic people. All of these tools and these dates and the area correlate with a previously known people called the pre-pottery Neolithic. Specifically with Göbekli Tepe, it's pre-pottery Neolithic A, which is the oldest of these people, and then pre-pottery Neolithic B, which is a slightly different. It's like they're more recent, and there had been some changes. And then there's also a C, but I don't think C is represented at Göbekli Tepe or Karahan at all. It's pre-pottery Neolithic A and B. So these people are early Neolithic. They lived in the Levantine and Upper Mesopotamian region of the Fertile Crescent. And the PPN range from roughly 12,000 to 8,500 years ago, or 10,000 to 6,500 BCE. They are also associated with the domestication of plants and animals, which may have been induced by the Younger Dryas. So this is really interesting. These people are credited with inventing agriculture in this area. And you can see this is just showing you the area that they have been associated with. Plenty of sites where they have been well known for decades, right? I mean,
yeah, that's what I want to make this point too, is that these people have been known about by archaeologists for a long time. And they were never considered to be megalithic stone workers.
That's right.
Or builders. They were never associated with any of that type of work until the discovery of Göbekli Tepe in the 90s.
Yeah.
When they found their lithics at the very bottom, then it was like, wow, this is, the archaeologists make the assumption that that's who built it.
Yeah.
So previous to that, they were never associated. And we'll get into that in just a minute. Concerning one of the oldest cities in the area.
That's right. Jericho, one of the oldest cities in the world. It's also the city with the oldest known defensive wall. It's located in the Jordan Valley with the Jordan River to the east and Jerusalem to the west. Archaeologists have unearthed the remains of more than 20 successive settlements in Jericho, the first of which dates back 11,000 years to 9,000 BCE, almost to the very beginning of the Holocene. So this is some of the oldest layers of Jericho. On the left here, you can see very rudimentary mud brick construction and some cobblestone walls. And then on the right here, you can see a complex cobblestone construction, some defensive walls, and a circular tower. This tower is really interesting. It is 3.6 meters or 12 feet high, almost 6 feet wide at the base. Well, that's the wall. The tower itself was 28 feet high and contained an internal staircase with 22 stone steps. The tower and the older ones this is one of the oldest towers ever to be discovered. The wall of Jericho may have served as a defense against floodwater, with the tower used for ceremonial purposes. The wall and tower were built during the pre-pottery Neolithic A period, around 8,000 BCE. So you can see this cobblestone construction of this tower here on the right. Now we compare it to one of the enclosures of Göbekli Tepe, which is also supposed to be PPNA. And there's like a kind of subtle difference. Maybe you guys will notice.
Giant T-pillars.
Yes.
And flattened bedrock. Yes. And raised carvings, bas relief, high relief carvings. Yeah, maybe some of that.
But the cobbles look very similar.
That's right. The rock walls around the T-pillars look like the walls at Jericho.
Yeah, exactly.
So in other words, the midden materials at the base, at the bottom layers of Göbekli Tepe, and the rock wall constructions match the PPN people. That's and right. Their capabilities.
Yeah. But what doesn't match are the megaliths. So the question we want to ask is, did the PPN people actually construct these megaliths? Did they build them, or did they find them and then live there because they found the megaliths there? So regarding the construction of the megaliths, there are two possibilities. You can sort of narrow it down to two possibilities. Either the megaliths came first, or the midden came first. In other words, the megaliths were built first and then the midden built up around it as people lived there. or people were living there and the midden built up and then they built the megaliths later on, which would mean you would have to dig down through the midden to expose the bedrock, flatten it out.
Yeah, you'd have to build retaining walls to hold back all of that midden because it's very deep. The archaeologists today struggle with keeping those midden walls retained during heavy rains and stuff like that. It would have been a huge problem.
Right. So when you go to the site now, what you see is a big hole in the midden with retaining walls and the megaliths down there. The question is did they dig down through the midden and build it that way? Or is this a result of them building up midden around already existing megaliths and then having to put in retaining walls? So one of the arguments against the midden coming first is if you were already living on this hilltop for a long time and you built up a big pile and then you were like, you know what, I want some big circular flattened platforms with some megaliths, you could just build them here. This is a really cool...
That's a great spot.
It's a great spot for some megaliths, some big megalithic enclosures.
Nothing there, just bedrock.
There's another great spot right here. It's got a great view out there to the east. Look at that, over the valley. And if you kind of want to be far away from the big pile of midden where everybody's living, you could build it here. In other words,
I definitely would go there.
Yeah, that looks like a great spot. We're kind of joking
no
here.
midden to dig through.
The point is you don't have to dig through any midden and you can still make your enclosures. Right. So it seems like that means that the megaliths came first and the midden was built up around it. So let's take a look.
I think that's also the view of the archaeologists as well.
I think so,
The megaliths were the initial, that whole structure at the bottom was the first thing and then the midden slowly built up. So it's not a stretch to make that claim.
That's right. So let's look at some diagrams of the construction of the enclosures themselves. So we're told that that there was a little bit more soil cover during the period that they were constructed, right?
I mean, there is a study on that, and it just says there may have been a mild sediment cover on the hilltops. It probably wouldn't have been deep. I'm guessing at most you'd probably think a foot or two.
Okay, yeah. So my drawing is not to scale. Sorry.
Yeah.
Too much. I gave it too much dirt. But you can see here the limestone bedrock covered by a soil cover. So the first thing they would do is dig through the soil cover to expose the bedrock. Then they would rock cut the platform enclosure itself. In other words, carve it out of the bedrock, flatten it out, and they would leave these two pedestals in the center and a bench around the outside of the enclosure. Then they would carve these sockets into the pedestals. Then they would have to quarry, carve, and transport the T-pillars to the site and then insert them into the sockets in the bedrock. So this is all the basic steps for the enclosure construction with the central pillars.
Yeah, now this is a completely different skill set than, for example, the tower at Jericho, right? This rock and mortar construction, the types of tools you would be using, the moving of heavy loads obviously is one thing, but I mean, cutting that bedrock down and flattening it, and obviously the carvings are involved here too. This is a completely different set of skills. So it's hard to imagine that this is the same builders that were making the tower at Jericho, for example.
That's right.
So let's take a look at some of the rock walls. This is a rock wall at Göbekli Tepe. And as you can see, these are broken rocks. They are not hewn. They're not carved. They were not made to have flattened faces. They are broken, and then a fairly flat face of one of the broken sides is used on the face of the wall. And then there are smaller, fist-sized and even smaller stones used to sort of fill in the cracks and maybe level and keep some of the rocks more stable in the wall. It's a beautiful wall construction, but not anywhere close to the same thing as carving a megalith. Now we're going to back out a little bit from this wall looking at the same wall, a little bit zoomed out, you can see in the upper left of that wall a carved stone. That stone is carved and probably the base of a small T-pillar.
Yeah.
And it has been broken on its right side and was used in the construction of this wall. Now, this wall surrounds a set of central pillars. But the fact that this hewn stone that's broken clearly is used in this wall suggests that the builders of the wall were building this wall after megalithic carved stones were already broken.
Right. In other words, they were using old T-pillar parts to construct their cobblestone wall.
Yes.
So looking back at Göbekli Tepe again, you can begin to see that it's possible that these people showed up long after these T-pillars had been constructed and had already been abandoned and were in ruins, and they began to attempt to restore the site.
Yeah, there are a lot of different features we can see here, like where they have stood up broken pillars on top of rock wall construction to make the tops of those pillars the same height as whole pillars. You can see that in a couple of cases here. You can see that many of the pillars are surrounded and held in place on three sides by the rudimentary rock wall construction. And we're going to take a look at more of that in a little bit. So this is the famous vulture stone. You can see here where the rock wall actually covers up some of the carving. So it's hard to imagine that this was the initial plan or design of this building, was to ornately carve and sculpt these beautiful pillars and then put actual imagery, carve imagery into them, only to then cover that imagery up with this rudimentary rock wall construction. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
This is the enclosure C, I believe, one of my favorite enclosures. And there's a lot of great examples in this enclosure. For example, on the right there's a broken pillar that's standing on rock wall construction. There is an interesting... Yeah, this is a little closer look at that. You can see it's just being propped up.
Yeah.
There's a lot more in this enclosure. Back behind the central pillars here, you can see this is a really interesting one, where it looks like the rock wall itself was sort of finished out with a gap in it, and then they stood this broken pillar in there and perhaps stacked up rocks in between the opening. I mean, I'm just trying to get my head around why you would, what was in the mind of the builders here. Clearly, the builders building these rock walls are not the original megalith builders, because they would have just replaced that broken megalith.
Yeah.
But they didn't.
That's a great point. Yeah.
They stood it up. And this isn't really disputed by the archaeologists either. The archaeologists know that there were multiple stages of renovations to the site. However, we're just sticking with the vast difference here in the skill set between these rock walls and these megaliths. Clearly, the people that were standing up these broken megaliths were not prepared to carve new ones. Yeah. Otherwise, they would have. They would have replaced the broken ones, but they didn't. They didn't even... I mean, they just stacked up these rudimentary rock walls.
Yeah.
So there's this, going back to the rock wall here, there's just want you to notice the vertical discontinuity in the rock wall, like a gap was left in order to, because they knew they were going to stand up an old pillar in there, and then they stacked up the rocks underneath it to get it the right height, and then filled in the rest of the gap. It's also on the right side, you can see the column on the right there, there's a vertical discontinuity in the rock wall.
And this affects the strength of the walls.
Absolutely.
So that's one of the reasons we're pointing this out. As you can see, they built these walls up to a certain point, left an alcove for the pillar. Then they were like, which pillar goes in here? This one goes in here. And then they had to stack up rocks in the alcove to get the pillar to the right height. And that leaves these discontinuities in the walls themselves. And you can see it on both of these pillars.
Yeah. So just going back to the overview here, you can see this same type of details all throughout this entire area. These broken pillars stood up, and yet right there in the center of that enclosure shows the ability of the megalithic stoneworkers, that they were able to flatten that bedrock and leave that raised pedestal, which is part of the bedrock still, cut a slot in it and stand this monstrous single piece column in it and it be self-supporting.
Yeah. And all around in this picture, you can see pillars that are very short, that are being held up by the walls, artwork covered up, pillars are half buried, and yet you have this central, these central pillars and their pedestals.
So let's go back and take a look again at Jericho. This tower is 28 feet high, and it has no megaliths. So from a construction standpoint, you can understand that, like, it wasn't necessary to have megaliths around the outsides of these circular enclosures. They could have just built rock walls.
Yeah.
If there was a roof structure on top, I'm sure this tower had a roof. You don't need megaliths to build a tower or to build a circular enclosure. The Pueblo culture did it with their kivas. The Chacoan culture, they didn't use megaliths. Megaliths are completely unnecessary. And in fact, they actually weaken the structure, as Russ was saying, because they create that vertical discontinuity in your rock wall, which makes the independent sections of rock wall that go between the megaliths easier to topple. I mean, they can, and it's clear that that's what's been happening at Göbekli Tepe.
Right. So the implication here, again, what we're talking about here is that the PPNA people who constructed these rock walls were renovating a much more ancient site that consisted of megaliths and platforms that was built by somebody else before them.
And they were doing it with a technique and a skill set that they were very good at.
Yeah, that they
and very
knew.
familiar with.
That's right. And it just didn't work too well with megaliths, involved.
And it's understandable. Yeah. That would have made it very difficult. But they did a good job.
They did. And just to point out about the dating of the megaliths themselves, we have a couple of papers here. This one is Establishing a Radiocarbon Sequence for Göbekli Tepe, State of Research and New Data by Oliver Dietrich et al. And they're basically going through this section here is talking about how they were attempting to date materials. They're saying the attempt was made to date the architecture directly using pedogenic carbonates, and they go through their procedures, which we're not going to get into. But at the end here, you can see it says the data failed to provide absolute chronological points of reference for the architecture and the strata. And then there's another paper here, Radiocarbon Dating the First Temples of Mankind, comments on carbon-14 dates from Göbekli Tepe, also by Oliver Dietrich. And here he says, the radiocarbon dates from this material cannot fix the enclosures themselves chronologically. So, to date, they have not been able to reliably date the construction time of the megaliths themselves. You can date the material, they can reference the tools and everything in the material and connect them to the PPNA people, but the actual date of the construction of the megaliths is still unknown.
Yeah.
All we know,
they know when the PPN people showed up.
That's
pretty
right.
much.
They
pretty
know,
close.
Right. They know when the PPNA people showed up, but the question is were the megaliths and the platforms and the enclosures already old by the time that happened? So let's review real quick what we've looked at. We know that the narrative of the sites themselves is constantly evolving as more science gets done. That the Göbekli Tepe megaliths themselves are at the very bottom of this enormous tell that they are contained in. That the tell material itself is pre-pottery Neolithic. That pre-pottery Neolithic elsewhere was not associated with any kind of megalithic construction. That there was a lot of obvious restoration efforts by the PPN people of the megaliths and the enclosures themselves. That these restoration efforts caused construction problems, that the PPN people had their own well-established construction types that they were good at in other places, but it didn't work so well for them here at Göbekli Tepe. And the megaliths themselves cannot be dated scientifically. So all of this is all we're pointing out here is that it's very possible. It's still open that the megaliths themselves might actually be much older than 10 or 12,000 years. They could have been there. I mean, they could have only been there for a couple hundred years and abandoned, but they could have also been there for 1,000 years. Who knows?
But love the idea that the PPN people found these mysterious sites. This is the other point, is that the PPN people were traditionally known to build in valleys next to water.
Yeah.
So they were never associated with hilltop construction far away from water sources until the discovery of Göbekli Tepe, where their midden materials were found, right?
Yeah.
So again, it comes back to that midden material, which is the evidence for the PPN people. But the idea that they found these megalithic sites already dilapidated,
Yeah.
and revered them and tried to restore them and use their best builders to come and stand everything up and try to remake it and learn from it is a wonderful idea to me.
Yeah.
I just love that idea. Ancient archaeology.
Ancient archaeologists. That's right. That they were ancients and that they treasured this site.
Yeah.
So now that we've established that, let's take another look at what can we learn from the megaliths themselves. Up until this point, we've not really talked too much about the carvings of the central pillars. But I'm sure many of you have seen this, that they are sort of anthropomorphized, right? The T-pillars themselves are structural. They appear to be structural pillars, but they're also, they seem to be representing people or a person. And like, for example, this one, you can see he's wearing a belt of some kind, and there are these interesting, I don't know, like an H symbol, these artifacts on it. These kind of look like metal buckles to me. But I don't know. Metal? 12,000 years ago? This is a controversial idea.
I'm still going with that's his lift belt, dude.
These are, yeah.
He's standing there.
Look at
He's
this.
just like,
yeah.
he's like, yeah, I just lifted that megalith.
Nice and ripped.
They're mega lifters.
But yeah, these look like, I don't know, links in a chain or something.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
I don't know. It's really beautiful, these H symbols on the belt. And on the belt on this other one, you can see he's got like some kind of pelt hanging over the front of it there, like an animal pelt or a fox pelt or something. And then you can also see his arms. So he's got these long, thin arms that come all the way down, and there's the elbow in the back, and then they come forward, and you can see the fingers. They've got these long, narrow, distinctive fingers that curve around the front, right in the navel area, just above the belt. And they're also here on the pillar on the left. And I think this is a distinctive style. These long, narrow fingers and this particular pose, this posture. And we have seen this posture and this pose and even the long, narrow fingers in other places in the world. I know you guys will recognize these. The Moai from Easter Island. Look at their poses. Look at the posture. Look at the arms and look at the hands. We can zoom in. You can see those long, narrow fingers, the same posture, with the hands going right underneath the navel, just above the belt buckle, or where the belt would be. But these ones have been exposed for a long time, so they have some erosion. But some of these have been dug up because they're buried up to their chins, and that left them the lower areas protected, and you can really see these long, narrow, strange-looking fingers on this one that was excavated. And on this one that was also excavated, you can see these long, narrow fingers and this same strange and interesting posture. So that's Easter Island, completely on the other side of the world from Göbekli Tepe. And this is from Tiwanaku in Bolivia. Not quite the same pose, but very close. And the other interesting thing is that this is a pillar. So this is an anthropomorphized pillar. So it's the pillar in the pose, and I think he's holding some tools there. But same deal. He's got a belt. It's decorated. The belt looks like it's got links and everything. And so, you start wondering, like, could there possibly be some connection here all the way across here? And this is what's interesting to us is there some mysterious, almost completely unknown ancient connection between these very distant places? Going back to the Göbekli Tepe area, this is Urfaman, one of the earliest life-size sculptures of a person that has been found so far, one of the oldest. And he's got the same pose. This sculpture is much more rudimentary, but he's got the same pose with the hands coming down and the fingers curling around right over or in the navel area. And then this was found more recently at Karahan. It's very rudimentary or very rough, but this guy's kind of excited to see you guys.
Obviously a fertility statue.
Yeah, some kind of fertility statue. But it's the same
or
pose.
a joke.
Yeah, it could be a joke. Now, what's interesting about this is if you go over to Indonesia, then you have these. And these guys look like they're wearing a mask, but he's got this same sort of fertility pose. Arms coming down with the hands there. And it's really strange.
This style of the eyebrows curving down into this sort of squared nose, or that style is actually seen in some of the humanoid heads that are carved around Göbekli Tepe as well. That's really interesting right there.
Yeah. To me, it looks like a mask or a helmet or something, but it could also just be a very stylized human depiction. This is another one from the Bata Valley in Sulawesi in Indonesia. So it's similar pose, hands coming. And this guy's only got 3 fingers. You know, it's really weird. But it's the same thing. Like, it looks like he's wearing a helmet or some kind of mask. And he's got this similar pose with the arms coming down and these long, thin fingers curling around there in the navel area. And then there's this thing. There's no real like pose connection. I just want everybody else to see theirs in their nightmares like I do. This stone man-worm coming out of the ground. One more thing I want to point out, and this is more of a stretch, but I really find this fascinating. In Göbekli Tepe, there's this beautiful high relief sculpture of a cat or some kind of feline creature crawling down the side of one of the T-pillars. And they've also found this sculpture of another feline creature from the top. This is like a top-down view.
That's crazy. They think that's a feline. It looks like a lizard. You think?
It's called a
bulgy eyes. Yeah, I'm just saying.
Yeah, it could be a lizard. It's called a. They say. Well, the description says wolverine or felid or I can't remember what the other one was, but they don't know what it is. But I'm thinking it's a cat.
Okay.
It could be a lizard, but those look like paws.
Yeah, I know. I'm just talking about the bulgy part of the head. But anyways, I don't.
Yeah, you're right. The eyes are strange.
Distract from that.
No, it's okay. And then again, if you go to Peru, there are these beautiful towers, these beautiful megalithic towers called Chulpa in Silistani in the highlands in Peru.
Clearly tombs.
I think these are some kind of metallurgical thing, right? Look at the little entrance there, or the exit there at the bottom. But on one of them, this one's busted, but you can see this relief carving. And yes, this is actually, like Kyle was saying, lizard. This is called the Lizard Tower. But it looks very similar.
I guess they both could be cats. They both could be lizards.
They could be lizards or cats. But we know that Peru, this area of Peru, there's lots of puma imagery.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I think this might be a cat.
Okay.
And this is why in the old dolmen stuff, we made this joke. It's like, is it a lizard or is it a puma? We don't know.
Sure.
Yeah, what is that under dolmen? It's supposed to be a lizard.
Kind of looks like a
puma. So yeah, this one's a bit more of a stretch, but I find this kind of thing very interesting. Is there possibly a connection from Göbekli Tepe with these stylized T-pillar poses to Easter Island with these stylized poses with the fingers in the navel area just above the belt and these long, narrow fingers, to Indonesia with the same kind of pose, possibly wearing a mask, to Bolivia? And if that is true, if all of these cultures either were operating on some similar ancient knowledge or ancient cultural references, or some of these artifacts are actually much, much older than we have possibly considered, and that this knowledge was reflected in these megaliths at Göbekli Tepe, then that would make it very, very old indeed. And it would be a treasure of the ancients. Done.
Hot damn.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys
Yeah.
for watching, listening.
Well, we went in an hour. That's too long.
I know. Yeah, but we BS'd in the beginning a bit.
That's true. We did.
I took some liberty during the presentation, too, to chat.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
I'm just going to sit back quietly while Russ delivers the whole thing.
Yeah. It'll be fine. Dude.
And I'll be like, just make some comments here and there.
Yeah. Just wait for your one opportunity to make a joke.
I just got to, I'll have to jump in and talk about the lithics a little bit. But
You're going to be fine.
I know.
Fine.
I know. I'm just joking around, but yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yeah. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Thank you so much for supporting the show.
Yes.
We will, after Cosmic Summit is done, we are
On break.
Yeah, we're on break. We basically don't have anything to do for months and months, except for just, regular work. So
we'll be doing the shows. We'll be doing some live shows. We got to catch up on emails and all that kind of stuff. I'm looking forward to
We
this.
got more guests coming up. I just want to let you guys know, we recorded an episode with Marty, and it was awesome.
But you can't have it.
You can't have it yet because it was supposed to be one episode, but it went real long, and we had to stop. But there's more material, so we're gonna have to record a part B of part 4 of part 13 with Marty, and then we'll publish them back to back because he really wants those episodes to come out together. So we're gonna do that. So you're just gonna have to wait,
Marty,
on the Marty-sode. Anyway, we love you guys.
Always have.
Always will.
Good night, Adamu.
Get back to work.